Welcome to Book Lounge by Libby. I'm Joe, and I'm so happy you're here. This is the second part of our Mystery and Mayhem week. On Monday, we dove into The Anatomy of a Twist with Lisa Gardner, Joe Piazza, and Claire McIntosh. Today, to put some amazing mystery, crime, thriller, spooky recs on your to-be-read list, I have the wonderful Abby from Crime by the Book here. Abby, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here.
I love anyone who will answer a psychotic email from me that says, please, I want to talk to you.
I love anyone who will send a psychotic email. So we're friends already. This is going to be
Perfect.
great.
That's the dream. Abby, for anyone who may not know, could you share a little bit about your space of the internet?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Abby. I run Crime by the Book, which is a crime fiction, thriller, mystery, suspense Instagram account. It started as a website. The website still exists, but it's a little bit out of date at this point. I've really been focused on socials for a while now, but I basically curate an Instagram account all about all things crime and thriller. And in my sort of spare time, I also curate a book subscription service with my amazing local independent bookstore, Murder by the Book, here in Houston, Texas. So I am like all things thriller all the time.
Oh my gosh, I love everything about that. And I'm like, I'm going to need to sign up for that because I love this genre, because I also love how broad it is and how
Yes.
niche you can get, but also just how sweeping you can get. This is one of those sections of any, indie bookstore, library, wherever we're at, where I'm just like, I can get lost and find something delightful, even though it may feel too sweeping.
No, I totally agree. And sometimes I think people, they can't quite believe that I really do just read, crime fiction. I get a lot of questions of, really, what do you do if you get bored? How do you mix things up? And I say every time, I think the crime fiction genre includes so much. And
Yeah.
for me, it's this endless array of, books and subgenres and categories that I just always can find new things that I'm excited by. So I don't think the day will ever come when I get bored of this genre.
Well, even with crime genre specifically, I think of Steve Kavanaugh, who is writing American crime dramas from the UK.
Yeah.
Just that concept alone already destroys me. But there are so many perspectives because you can have different police procedurals from different countries around the world. And
Yeah.
there's so much to get to experience, but also sorry, listeners, I've already seen Abby's incredible list for today. There's so much variety that we get that I think sometimes people forget that not all of us are playing in the I'm here to bring you the niche slice of the pie. I know
Yeah.
you might be technically more narrowed,
Mhm.
but it's still, like we said at the beginning, okay, you're narrowed in the biggest jungle in the world, basically.
Exactly. And I think it's one of the things that makes, having this kind of specific lane that I'm in so fun is that you really do feel like you're always getting to discover new corners of this space that you might never have known. And there are so many amazing authors who are doing kind of cross genre projects and pushing the bounds of what we think a, quote unquote crime or mystery or suspense novel can be. And for me, it's just this endless source of joy and entertainment to keep uncovering, all the amazing stories that writers have for us in this lane.
Would you say that you don't necessarily stick to a subgenre, that you're kind of playing across everything, or?
Yeah, I try really hard to play across everything. I would
Mhm.
say I'm just going to admit my own bias. I'm not a huge action thriller
Yeah,
reader. That's probably the
Jack
one.
Reacher isn't for you.
It's not
Totally.
for me. My husband loves it, not for me. But
Yeah,
all due respect to those fans and those
of
books, of course.
course.
I do have a few kind of subgenres that I typically gravitate towards, but I try to read as widely as I possibly can. That being said, of course, Crime by the Book is it's my passion project, and I am, at the end of the day, a bit of a mood reader. So there are certain
Yes.
subgenres that I'm always going to be excited to see new books coming in those categories.
Ooh, I love it. And let's see. With such a robust nature, how do you even begin to manage your to be read list?
If I had a really great answer, I would let you know. I mean, you can see behind me, the far shelf over here
Uh huh.
are TBR. That's why it looks a little chaotic. That's the TBR shelf. So yeah, it's a little daunting, but I
Fair.
mean, I try the very best I can. I mean, obviously, there are certain authors I'm just always going to read, their new books. Riley Sager is one for me. I'm going to read everything he writes. I love his books. There's a lot of writers like that where I'll always pick up their new release. And then, beyond that, like I said, I do gravitate towards certain subgenres. So if you're going to show me a locked room mystery, especially like a bookish locked room mystery, I'm going to go for that. I love Nordic noir. You were talking about, procedurals from other countries. Scandinavian crime fiction is a personal passion for me. So I'm always going to try to keep up with new releases in that category. But, each month I try to kind of give myself a little or big stack
Yeah.
of the new releases that I know of that are coming out. And I try to, sort through them. Obviously, at this point, I've been doing Crime by the Book for a long time, excuse me. And I do know the kinds of things that my audience will be excited by as well. So I do want to keep an eye out for, what's coming that they might like to hear about. And then also balancing that with new voices and voices that I think need a bigger spotlight on them, because with a genre this broad, there are a lot of new books coming out. So I think it's about striking that balance between returning favorites, catering to an audience where I do know the things that they love, and then also figuring out what are the new, maybe underrepresented, underexplored corners of the genre that I want to spotlight as well.
Absolutely. How do we sneak in like who like the up and comers? Because I think
Exactly.
I love to talk to everyone when it comes to authors because I think debuts have such an interesting conversation. I think people who are coming from Indian small pubs have such an interesting thing to add to the conversation. And I feel like I have played so much in the like tap dancing around everywhere that it's like, oh, here's a beloved for this one specific thing. Here's this niche moment. Here's this, here's that.
Yeah.
That when I was recording for the listeners Monday's episode, I was like, oh, right. These are all super established authors
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
put out like 1 to 17 books a year. And it's go that I forgot what that was. I
Yeah.
forgot what that was like. Like,
But it's so interesting. And it's like writers at all different stages
Mhm.
of their careers have so much to contribute to the conversation. And I love the fact that I think when you have a genre that you're really passionate about, when you're able to connect the lines between, fans of Lisa Jewell will love this new up and coming author. Like that's a really, I think, powerful way to make that connection for readers. So that's something that I've really enjoyed as well. It's just over the years, as my knowledge of the genre has grown, just being able to plug, up and coming writers in with bigger writers in terms of my recommendations. I love it.
1,000%. And I love voices like yours for that specifically because comps can be the hardest thing to look
Yes.
at when they're, and my pubs, I love y'all. But it's sometimes it's hard when you see it in the description because I'm just like, I won't know until I read it if I feel like that was accurate. And so
Yeah.
when I look at someone like you who has done that heavy lifting and go, yep, that comp was
Yeah.
exactly what it should have been.
Well, that makes me very happy to hear because that's a
Yeah.
goal, because I think it's also by the same token, readers are trusting, those of us with online platforms, whether it's a podcast, a social account, whatever it might be, readers trust us to give, accurate to the best of our ability, accurate descriptions, let them know what they're in for. And nothing, okay, well, not nothing makes me sadder, but one of the things that makes me very sad is to see someone, maybe not enjoy a book as much as they might have if their expectations had been appropriate going into it. Books, it's so
Like,
easy for books to get mischaracterized or
huh.
talked about using buzzwords that maybe aren't quite a fit for what the read actually is. So it matters a lot to me to get that language right and to get the
Yes.
comps right and to frame books correctly.
Absolutely. That's why I tend to stick to the descriptions or if the author has said anything online, because once you start talking in buzzwords and marketing terms, you lose any hope of maybe not lose any hope, but I think it's so easy to convey incorrectly what that person's experience might be.
Yeah.
I look at Dollface, incredible recent read, and I think it was comped as like Scream meets Barbie.
Mhm.
I totally see where they pulled both of those things from, and I don't disagree, but I think the experience I had was incredible, and I think I've since recommended it it was on like one of my release radar picks, but then I brought it up for a different episode entirely. I still stand by it. I think people will love and enjoy it greatly, but I think right if you're looking at that like log line push versus
Yeah.
once you're in it, still incredible. I just had to I had to shift gears real quick. And then I went,
Yeah.
this was still made for me.
Yeah, 100%. And like I think that's such a valuable perspective to have and to be able to contribute to the conversation. And when you also know, your listeners and books that have resonated for them, and that's just going to make you even better equipped to make that connection for them and to frame what you're reading. So it's a very interesting and nuanced conversation. And I feel like we could probably have a whole episode on
Oh, easily.
publishing, jargon and yeah, like taglines, buzzwords, all of this stuff.
And if you want to do that, I will happily
I'm in.
facilitate that.
I'm
Okay,
in.
perfect.
Listen.
We'll set that later. But if I know one thing, it's that my listeners expect me to get on my usual soapbox. And I think I'm going to do that with my very first pick. This is The Millhouse Murders by Yukito Atsuji. This came out in 2023. It's literature and translation, which is, like I said, that's one of my soapboxes. I think if you are not reading books in translation, you are missing out. And I think it's a great way to increase kind of like your playability when it comes to what you have to enjoy in general. So, just a quick rundown for everyone. It's a hugely enjoyable, page turning classic Japanese mystery with an ingenious conclusion from the author of The Decagon House Murders, translated into English for the first time. It is beautifully constructed, highly entertaining, and an atmospheric murder mystery, propulsive plot making for a compelling page-turning read. This follows a small group of acquaintances who every year pay a visit to a remote castle-like watermill house, home to the reclusive Fujinuma Kichi, son of a famous artist who has lived his life behind a rubber mask ever since a disfiguring car accident. This year, however, the visit was disrupted by an impossible disappearance, the theft of a painting, and a series of baffling murders. The brilliant Kiyoshi Shimida arrives to investigate, but will he get to the truth? And will you be able as well to solve the mystery of the Millhouse Murders? What's fun about Yukito's books is that it almost feels a little bit like a choose your own, not choose your own adventure
Mhm.
because you have one path that you're following, but it feels like an interactive read. I think that's the big thing for me is that you are very much an investigator in the story. My listeners also know I'm a huge audiobook nerd. That's what I do most of my listening. Decagon House was not my favorite audiobook. Take that where you will. I mean, no disrespect. I just just know that this might be one that if you are a person who tends to pick if you tend to flip your options, maybe go with the ebook or the physical book version over the audio. So,
That sounds amazing. I have to say one of my proudest moments was early on when I was getting to know my in-laws, my mother-in-law bought Decagon House Murders. We were at the bookstore together and loved it. And I was like, "You are so cool and I love this." Like, that is awesome.
it's incredible. I think truly my only complaint was I didn't enjoy the audiobook as much as I would have.
Yeah.
Otherwise, incredible because it's so different from what we are served. And I think from a young age, I read the I can't remember Case Closed is the English translation, but of the manga series, but it's like Detective Conan, and it's like a teen detective who has a curse placed on him, and he becomes a kid, and everything is there's locked room mysteries. It's like
Yeah.
an Agatha Christie dream,
Yeah.
just book after book, and so I think part of that inspired this love of that, but the thought in Japanese thriller and kind of mystery novels. So different and
Yeah.
so more leaned to some of our root classic Holmes and Christie sensibilities than I think even the UK writers are doing still.
Yeah. That is so fascinating, and I will just and then I'll
No,
get off my
please.
little soapbox here, but what you're talking about makes me think, kind of tying back to the idea of why don't you get bored just reading crime fiction? I mean, look at this, what we're talking about. This
Right.
is, something that I love is seeing the way, whether it's different writers in different
Mhm.
time periods, different cultures, whether
Yes.
they, feed inspiration feeds off each other and the way that people put their own unique spins on these sort of classic structures or tropes. I mean, to me, that in and of itself, you could spend a lifetime reading, lock through
Right.
mystery iterations and never read the same book twice, and you would never get bored.
Absolutely. And same thing with like mystery on a train. Like there
Yes,
are things that version after version will never tire of. Or even if you start to feel played out, you switch to the next trope you love
exactly.
as you wait for like your counter to reset.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. Oh, I absolutely love it. Well, let's see. Maybe I'll dive into I brought show and tell as well here. I'm going to dive
Perfect.
into my first recommendation. So I had to go with Night Watching by Tracy Sierra for my first recommendation. I think Tracy Sierra is just one of the most incredible writers. She's a newer author. She only has 2 books out right now. Night Watching was her debut. Her new book is called Warning Signs. It came out in February. I think she is just incredible, the most gorgeous prose you've ever read. And she has this way of putting you inside these characters' minds. I don't know how better to
Mm.
describe it, but her writing is very intimate and very unsettling for that reason. So Night Watching, her debut, is a home invasion thriller and it takes place in New England. It's a cold, snowy night in New England and this woman is home alone. She lives in this, beautiful old kind of colonial house, kind of
Mhm.
remote. She's home alone with her 2 young children and she hears something and she realizes there's a man in her house. And I have goosebumps right now, just like recounting this. I read this book like 2 years ago and it still gets me. The story basically follows her as she's, trying to kind of smuggle her kids to safety because this is an old house. It has these sort of hidden rooms where she's able to tuck them away. And it's, a question of how do you explain to your kids what's going on? These are young children. Are they going to stay quiet? The tension in this story is so palpable. I think we use phrases like, oh, this book had me on the edge of my seat or I got goosebumps or whatever. We use phrases like that talking about thrillers, but I actually had that like visceral physical reaction to reading this book. And that's one piece of the story is her in the house with this man, treading through the house. Absolutely terrifying. But then the other piece of the story kind of taps into something that I'm very interested in is it's a story about do we believe women when they're recounting
Mm.
what has
Mhm.
happened to them? There's a whole other thread of the story where, not going to spoil anything, of course, but she's
Sure.
recounting things that have happened to her. And she discovers that the people around her in positions of authority do not believe her. And she's trying to figure out how she can convey what she's experienced. And this was an incredibly resonant part of this novel to me. And it made me think a lot about, I'm sure there are listeners out there who've experienced for all different reasons, in the healthcare field. Are you believed when you recount something you've been through? I mean, you could pick any any number
Right.
of reasons, right? But it's a very immediate way of making you think about that topic. How do we recount what we've been through? How do we make people believe what we've been through if we don't have quote unquote physical proof?
Right.
And that's a powerful thing to think about, and she weaves it into this thriller plot in such a gripping and visceral way. This book is, like, amazing. I mean, all the stars. I cannot recommend it highly enough, and her second book, Warning Signs, is a very different kind of story. Night Watching is very intimate, very claustrophobic. A lot of it does take place in this house. Warning Signs is almost a survival thriller set in the wilds of Colorado, so very different setting, but another very intimate story about, character and relationships. And it's so good. I love her. She's amazing.
No, I love that. I think it is number one, you want to take me out. It's a home invasion story. Like
Yes.
that is the absolute like height of my fear level. So you've destroyed whatever was going to be next in my queue because that just bumped to the top. But I think that's such a good point of like I feel like there are genres that always get a bad rap, or there are many facets that tend to get a bad rap. And I think there is an assumption when you look at Frida McFadden putting out like 4 books a year or however many it is, that people take away quality points, they take away substance points. And I feel like we're always trying to I don't know, like monopolize what reading should be for
Yeah.
everyone. That like there's one experience you have to have. And if you're not reading the New York Times bestseller
Yeah.
in the literature category that talked about this one thing that no one actually cares about, you're not actually reading and it doesn't count. And I hate that.
Agree.
and I
Agreed.
and I never say anything quite that harsh or directly. Like it's like, oh, it wasn't for me, but like I hate that energy
Yeah.
because it's bad. Like I just want people to
Yeah.
read and have fun. But also the same thing of like, that's exactly what I want to expect from our authors in especially in this genre that like you don't get a free pass, you still get to have a message.
Yes.
Like you don't just have to create popcorn. Like you are allowed to write a great twisty terrifying tale and deliver a message if you feel like
Yes.
it.
And you know what? I love everything about what you're saying. And I have so many thoughts. But, I think one of the things is when you think about, because there can be, there can be some genre snobbery. Let's just call a spade a
Absolutely.
spade.
Yeah.
But think about it. Think about the skill that it takes to write a story that is gripping, page turning, twisty, and also that sticks with you after and makes you think about that protagonist experience and makes you ponder that a little bit and just reflect on your own experiences and how that protagonist experience might reframe yours or that is asking a lot of writers, and to see someone do that with as much effortless. I mean, from the outside, it appears effortless. I'm sure Tracy worked so incredibly hard on this book, but for the reader, it's like this effortless blend of the entertainment value and that sort of thought-provoking central message. I just think that takes so much skill. And I also love what you say because, I think that there is a time and a place for every book. And I am so
Yes.
grateful that there are so many books out there that get people excited to read, whether it's highbrow, whether it's something else. Like, let's
Right.
just make more readers?
It's all I want. Like
Yep.
all I want is for people to become readers. And
Yep.
I don't mean that we all have to keep up with one another. If you started one book this year, guess what? You're a reader, even if you didn't finish it. Like you are a reader and it's okay. Like I want to democratize that concept alone of like there
Yes.
are no rules, there are no numbers. Just pick up and read. Like go for it.
Agreed.
It's
Agreed.
good for the brain.
It's good for the brain. It absolutely is. Agreed.
What's good for my brain is wow, I'm the king of segues today. Uh,
That was smooth.
yeah, never done that in my life. What's good for my brain is a very comfy, cozy kind of thrill. And I found that with a delightful series recently. And that is, I guess I get to share two books this time. The first one is Dead and Breakfast by Kat Hills and Rosie Thor. It is delightful. The new vampires in town are sinking their teeth into solving a murder. Married odd couple Arthur and Sal are totally normal. They wear sunscreen, not because the sun can kill them, but because even the undead need a skincare regimen. They eat garlic whenever they want, though it does give Sal indigestion. They can talk to creatures of the night, but only the raccoons that rifle through their garbage. Really, they don't bite, except into delicious baked goods. Ready to settle down and stay out of trouble, the two have opened a bed and breakfast in this idyllic, if not so paranormal friendly town of Trident Falls, Oregon. But trouble finds them when the mayor is discovered dead in their begonias with two puncture wounds in his neck. With the help of a werewolf barista, an elven town coroner, and a very human city manager, Arthur and Sal will need to prove they aren't literally out for blood by catching a killer. It's
That is amazing.
if you haven't read it yet, you should pick it up. It's delightful. The audiobook is done by the incredible Daniel Henning. Of course, that's how I found it because I love him. But if I could try my hand at a comp, this is Murder, She Wrote meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I think that's kind of the best way I could
I
put
mean,
it.
mic drop of a comp right there. That is so good.
It's just that kind of energy. Like it's that like, yeah, it's probably technically a cozy, but only just. Like
Yeah.
it falls somewhere between the like cozy fantasy realm, cozy mystery realm, and just kind of like general mystery realm. And I was excited to bring this up because in August this year, which, maybe I'll get my hands on it early if I'm lucky, who knows? There is a second book in the series called Summer Coven. Um, I love the play on words. So we get to see what the boys are up to. Um, just the quick line is everyone's favorite vampire odd couple is back for another bloody good time in this new supernatural mystery. So,
This sounds amazing.
right. I mean, it's a good time. And I think we need fun. And when I get the chance to bring fun in, between all of my horror and thriller reads, it's nice.
I love it. And once again, look at that, like, cross genre appeal. That sounds like a wonderful, wonderful time.
Absolutely.
Well, let's see. You know what? I'm gonna go for something that's also a wonderful time next, which is The Treasure Hunters Club. Have you read this book?
I have. I
I
have. It's so good.
love this book. What I will say about this book, when I heard about it, I was like, do I like books about treasure hunting? I don't know if I do. I'm not sure. This is a mystery about treasure hunting, but it is so much more than that. The quick pitch on this book is that it's basically a story about a bunch of different strangers who are all brought to this small kind of seaside town for different reasons. And the story follows their lives intersecting. Now, this town is the rumored site of lost pirate treasure. And it's been a town where treasure hunters come through all the time. It's kind of like their tourism industry there. And you're following these different characters and you're watching their lives intersect. And that is the simple pitch on this book. It is both completely delightful, completely endearing, excuse me, and so twisty. There is a plot twist, no spoilers, but this book has one of the best plot twists that I've read in a long time. I was completely blown away. You become so invested in these characters. You will cry, you will laugh, you will have the best time. And solving the mystery at the end of the book becomes this like amazing cherry on top of the incredible journey that you go on with these characters. So I loved, loved, loved this book. Tom Ryan has such an amazing way of just pulling you into the story and making you fall in love with this entire universe. Like I said, I never thought a treasure hunting book would be for me, but this was a favorite read of the year when I first read this one. I loved it.
It is a really beautiful book. I
It
mean,
is.
it's light, but also somehow not. Like, it's not light, but it
I
somehow
know.
feels light. And the layers that add to it throughout, I don't know. I feel like every amplification is exactly what I wanted to happen
Yes.
next.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I really think he has such a unique gift for bringing all these threads together because this is kind of like what you're describing, where it's sort of like it has some cozier, quote unquote, cozier,
Right.
gentler elements to it. It has elements of, family mystery. It does have literal lost pirate treasure that you're looking for as well. You have town dynamics. There's all these different threads coming together. And the way that they're woven together just makes you feel so a part of the story and a part of these characters' lives. You will fall in love with them. Genuinely, the twist is so, so good. This is not just a cozy mystery. Like it has that big twist that we want in a psychological thriller. I think it's just such a special book. And I think that it's hard to categorize, but the reason that it's hard to categorize is because of how incredibly unique
Right.
and brilliant it is. Like it's so good.
Its fault is being too awesome. Like
Its
that's
fault
the
is being too awesome. Tom Ryan, if you're listening, your fault
it,
is being too awesome. This book is
it's
amazing.
the truth. I mean, like there is something to it, and it's especially it's so weird to see right now the renaissance of like cozy fantasy because fantasy not so much for me, but cozy fantasy, I'm there. There's not as much heavy lifting and setup and stakes and extreme battles. Like I get just enough of a taste of everything. But this book is almost cozy mystery by those standards, but it's
Yes.
not a cozy mysteries already exist. Like
Yeah. I know.
so,
It's
so there's just not words for it now.
There's not words for it, but the words that I can say are that it's amazing. And if you have not read it, and if you want something that's just totally escapist, it just transports you, picks you up from wherever you are, brings you to this town, sweeps you up in the lives of its characters, and in the hunt for lost pirate treasure. I mean, what more can you want, really?
Yes. I'm going to take a wild swing into more of a stalking territory.
Oh, love it.
Right? Yeah. Wild pivot back in the other direction. This is from Jocelyn Jackson with My Little Eye. I stumbled across this, I think around the time it came out. And then I went through a wild reading rampage of all of Jocelyn's books. This one stood as my favorite. It's definitely like domestic suspense. But anyway, it started with letters. For actress Maribel Mills, disturbing fan mail is just a piece of the fame. So when she starts getting creepy letters written in fruit-scented marker, she's mostly unfazed. But there's something different about Marker Man. He's been in her home. Maribel's sheets smell of unfamiliar cologne, and objects are changing places inside her house. While the police insist the stalkers hardly ever escalate to violence, Maribel has played the dead girl one too many times on TV to risk becoming her in real life. She and her daughter move from Los Angeles to Atlanta for a fresh start. But no distance is great enough. He's watching her. Years of being in front of a camera have given Maribel a superpower. She can feel eyes on her, and someone definitely has her in their sights. Could Marker Man have followed her all the way across the country? Suddenly, every man in her life is a suspect, and Maribel finds herself in the fight of her life, desperate to protect those she loves as danger closes in from all sides. If he can't have her, no one can.
Ooh, that's chilling.
It's like it, it's exactly like it's exactly what you expect from that
Yeah.
description.
Yeah.
But I think Jocelyn does characters really
Mhm.
well. And I think I often get the most sucked into psychological thrillers like that are very character driven. And I love getting multiple points of view in a thriller. So I think if a lot of that speaks to you, it's a good one to pick up.
That sounds delightful. I mean, I can never say no to a good stalker story, so I'm gonna
Yes.
add that to my TBR. I'm like, that sounds like a delight. I'll read that.
Sorry. This is the danger of being on the show.
I'm
Your
suddenly my
TBR.
TBR shelf is about to explode even more.
It might.
Well, maybe for my next recommendation, I'm gonna do a twofer here because, you know, I'm sure your listeners and you have had this experience when you discover an author and it just feels like someone looked inside your brain and pulled out the elements you love in a book and wrote that for you. That is how I feel about Andy Pliego. Her debut novel, You Are Fatally Invited, came out last year. It is a bookish locked room mystery, bringing it all the way back to earlier when I said I love a bookish locked room mystery. You Are Fatally Invited tells the story of a group of thriller writers who all receive an invitation to attend a writing retreat held on the private island of a famous and very mysterious thriller writer who's written under a pen name and no one really knows who this person actually is. But as they settle in for this retreat, they begin to discover that this retreat isn't so much about writing a new thriller as it is about surviving the tropes of a thriller novel. So they are going to need to use all their knowledge of the thriller genre to make it off this island alive. It is completely just gripping, inventive, so much fun to read. It has so many Easter eggs and nods for fans of the thriller genre. I kind of feel like it's a cross between a Final Girls style thriller and then the vibes of a Scream movie. It's so good. Has some slasher vibes, has tons of thriller tropes. It's absolutely incredible. And it gave me that feeling of like, how did this woman know all the things that I want in the thriller read? So that's You Are Fatally Invited. And now, actually, as of the day that we are recording this episode, Andy's second book just came out today. This is The Library After Dark, and it is another incredible bookish locked room mystery. She really has found a lane that I absolutely love. This one
Yeah.
is interesting, though, because it kind of leans a bit more into fairy tale. So it's about a
Oh.
bookseller who is invited on a date by this man she's seeing to take a private tour of this reportedly haunted library in New York. And of course, while they're on the tour, what happens? Their tour group gets locked inside this haunted library, and people begin to die in ways that reflect the plot of this very dark book of fairy tales. It is an incredible, incredible story. I think Library After Dark leans a bit more, like I said, dark, gothic fairy tale kind of feel, where You Are Fatally Invited leans more slasher. So, depending on your mood, pick accordingly. But for me, these are just like the ultimate. I cannot get enough.
I love the sound of both of those. When I was looking at the titles earlier and popping the Libby links in, I was looking at You Are Fatally Invited and I went, oh my gosh, right. That's the book I've been meaning to read for a year.
Yeah.
Because I remember all of the publicity around it. And I was like, oh yeah, that'll be good. And like I don't even know if I had seen enough details to like hear the keywords you shared because that would have now I'm like, well, we're gonna be fighting for first place by the end of this episode of what I'm reading next. But
Yes.
it sounds so good. And uh, the follow-up, like, I'm sorry, murder mystery in a library, I'm sold.
It's so good, and I'm pretty sure so I just finished reading this book, but I'm pretty sure that she also wrote so at the this book being Library After Dark, I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure that Andy actually wrote the fairy tales that are at the center of this book, because there are little fairy tale excerpts throughout Library After Dark, but I believe that she actually wrote, like, the full-length, fairy tale collection, so I'm gonna be emailing her after this to see if I can get my hands on those because it's so good.
To be like, "Hi, gimme?"
It's me. I need this, please.
Please. Oh, no, I'm here for that. You know what? I'm just gonna go the like cozy-ish direction. Who would I
Okay.
be if not talking about drag queens? So next I want to bring up the Misty Divine mystery series, Murder in the Dressing Room, by Holly Starr's incredible debut mystery. So fun. And was it December 2025 RuPaul's Book Club pick? A little on the nose, Rue, but not mad about it. And it's your
Perfect.
right. It's your typical mystery: poison chocolate, stolen dress, elusive cat burglar. Drag's not just dramatic; it's deadly. By day, Joe is a hotel accountant, invisibly sitting behind their desk and playing by the rules. But by night, donned in sequins, they take to the stage as Misty Divine, a star of the London drag scene. But when Misty's drag mother, Lady, is found dead in her dressing room beside a poisoned box of chocolates, Misty and her fellow performers become the prime suspects. Heartbroken by the loss and frustrated by the clear biases of the police, Misty must solve the crime before the culprit strikes again. Among the drop dead gorgeous lurks a cutthroat killer, and Misty Divine won't rest until she finds out who it is. Read by the author for the audiobook, a super fun series, and happy to say that the second Misty Divine will be coming this June on the 2nd, and it's titled Missing in Soho. So if you find you like the first one, you don't have to wait long to find out about a missing photographer, a megalomaniac, what a word, a megalomaniacal millionaire, and a drag queen hellbent on saving her club, the latest glittering mystery from the author of Murder in the Dressing Room. So,
That is too good. People are so
right.
creative. Like, that is
Yes.
awesome.
And I'm sorry, but like, who doesn't want to watch a drag queen solve a murder mystery?
It's one of those things that, like, I would never have thought of that myself, and then once you
Same.
hear it, you're like, "Yes,
Why doesn't that already
obviously."
exist?
That is incredible.
It's kind of the best way when you're like, well, I never would have given that any thought, but now that I have, why is there only one?
Yeah, you're like, "Now I need all of it immediately." Yes, absolutely.
Right. I'm sorry, Holly, you're going to have to pump out a few more a little faster.
Like, "We're waiting, please."
Not a
Okay.
book a year. Sorry, get the speed up.
That is awesome. Well, I think for my next pick, I'm gonna select one that we said, we wouldn't think about that necessarily, but this is a topic that I think about all the time in a really weird way. We have to talk about possession stories for a very hard pivot. I went through a very intense phase of being super interested in exorcism stories, and I did all these autobiographies by exorcists. It was a whole thing. I don't That's a whole other podcast episode right there. But the book that I would like to recommend, you don't even need to be interested in exorcism in particular, because that's a very niche and odd thing, I will fully admit. But what you should be interested in is Isabel Cañas. She is one of the most incredible writers of gothic
Astounding.
suspense and horror, right? I mean, her prose is stunning. She is so incredibly talented. Each of her books tends to bring together multiple different subgenres or categories. So I would say she's a gothic horror writer, but she brings together supernatural suspense. She brings together kind of some romantic elements, historical fiction. She weaves it all together so beautifully. And the book I want to recommend is The Possession of Alba Diaz, which is her latest release. It is stunning. It is terrifying. It is set in 1765, so it is historical fiction, and it basically follows a woman whose family has to flee the city, and they go out to this more kind of remote sort of countryside setting. And while there, she goes into these caves. Her family is involved in, I believe it's making silver. And she goes into these caves where the locals say that there might be some sort of spirit or demon or entity in the caves. And while in there, something very inexplicable happens to her, and she leaves the caves not the same. And she becomes convinced that she is possessed. But of course, the only person around her who is willing to really listen or potentially help her is the one man with whom she's supposed to have absolutely nothing to do. So it's probably no spoiler to say there might be a little bit of a forbidden romance element to this book, but most of all, it's a story about a woman reckoning with something inexplicable happening in her own body. It's a story about a woman who all she wants is autonomy over her body, her life, her choices. She's about to be married off. And in this time, she has no say over what happens to her. She's desperate to forge her own path. And her desire for bodily autonomy is then sort of superseded by this potentially demonic entity that is controlling her. It is an incredible, incredible read. It is so scary. It's also so thought-provoking. It's beautifully written. There is a little bit of forbidden romance in there, which I have to admit I absolutely loved. And it's all just woven together in Isabel's gorgeous Gothic prose. This book is incredible. I felt like this was just a story I'd been waiting like years and years and years to find. It's absolutely astonishing.
I feel like this book is one that I would describe as sweeping.
Yes, great word.
Like,
Great word.
I feel like that might be one that gets thrown around, or like, oh, like sweeping visuals is what I think of. But this book spans so much, and there is so much detail and care given to everything. Vampires of El Norte as well, right?
Yeah, and
Okay,
the
yeah.
Hacienda was her
And the
first, and then
Hacienda, yes.
yep,
Okay.
yeah,
They're all
yeah,
like slotting into place. I'm like,
yeah.
I had to like see the covers first in my head, and then the titles to come with them. But all of her writing, right? The Hacienda, the Vampires of El Norte, and then the Possession of Alba Diaz, like it all just prose. And the fact that we
Gorgeous.
get to bring it up in our mystery and mayhem episode is the best part, because like that's what speaks to the genre. I'm
Yeah,
always looking for sneaky ways to get people to try horror, especially like horror is one of my all-time favorites. And I think this is one of those books that can do that, because it'll give you some of the elements. Like
yes.
it's definitely gothic, and it's got a sense of it. And yes, there are maybe perhaps supernatural things happening that check those boxes. But at the end of the day, it is absolutely the full, like, typical expectation of mystery thriller.
Yep,
Like, it fits that.
absolutely, and I think she's so skilled at weaving together these different elements, and I this book is just all of her books are so special. I love that you use the word sweeping because I do think she just brings each of the worlds of her books to life so beautifully, and I think we don't often talk about world building with crime fiction. That's not a phrase that we use as much for this genre, but maybe it's because her books are kind of cross genre that you really can talk about the world building in these stories and the way she brings time and place to life for the reader. You just feel like you're sinking into these universes that she creates. So The Possession of Alba Diaz is like such a special book. I cannot say enough good things about it.
And it is a treat to get some world building for a
Yes.
change.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to imagine the morgue. We don't have to imagine the whatever. Like, and since it has those historical elements, she has to do the educational lifting to give us the like to get us there to understand what's going on.
And then I think it's again a testament to her writing because, I remember reading this book, like kind of at the outset, I'm sort of taking inventory of like, okay, getting a sense of the time, the place, all of these world building elements. But then before you know it, you're just in the story and it all just washes over you. And to me, that's the mark of a really great writer
Yeah.
where they set you up and then it's like the train leaves the station and you're just on board. It's so great.
It is a book that like it's dense, and I say that with love because it is dense, and you can feel the weight of the words on those pages. And I think that also adds another brilliant layer to it. Like
Agreed.
you can feel the length of the book as you are experiencing it. And that's a pro that
Yeah.
adds something
It does.
to the experience.
Absolutely. And it is an experience. That's a great way of putting it. It is.
In the same way you mentioned claustrophobia earlier, like claustrophobic reads, I think this does the same thing of just like, this is happening over a period of time and you feel that. And it is
Yes.
so impossible to nail that, especially with like how we create content and what we serve people nowadays to
Yeah.
actually to be willing to like the moment I could feel that set in, I was like, am I ready for this? Because you had to choose to invest, like
Yeah.
because the book basically asks you, you ready to sit down for this? And like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's worth
And
it.
it is. And that's the thing. She earns every single page, every word, every moment of your time is earned. It is
And
like,
all of her writing is like that. Like
yep,
she sells you a product on every page and you are cashing, you are buy. Like
yep,
the,
100%.
I love that we've gotten to talk about this because it's one of those things that's so hard to describe because it could so easily come off rude,
Yeah.
I guess, or like
Yeah.
if I'm not thinking of the right way to say like, oh, it's dense
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
such
If
a
it sounds like
positive
a
way. And like,
criticism. Yeah.
right. Or like even being able to say like, oh, every one of those pages was deserved. Like
Yeah.
it is such
Yeah.
it is so true. It's so true.
Well, and I think it's like, especially as you said in this day and age where, short form video content is king, like people's attention spans are so limited. I think that it takes a really brave writer to ask that of the
Yeah.
readers. And it takes a really skilled writer to write a book that deserves every last bit of that time.
Absolutely. There are books that I will have loved the whole time and I'll get to the end and go, you could have cut 75
Yep.
pages.
Absolutely.
You could have cut 100
100%.
pages. Like, and I never do that with Isabel's books. Like I
Yep.
always get to the end and I'm just like, and what? She did it again.
I know. I'm like, well, she's once again proven herself to be one of the best writers I think I'll ever read. So
It's nuts. It's nuts. I feel like I tend to stick to the US and Canada unless I'm going to like Japan or a random other spot in the world. I all that to say, I never tend to end up in the UK with my books in general. But I think Margot oh gosh, she's gonna kill me with her name. I'm so sorry, Margot. Duehi with the Sister Holiday Mystery series. She can prove me wrong. I want to like punk sassy nun. This is the most recent book in the series. It came out January of this year, 2026. If you haven't checked out Scorched Grace and the second book in the series, do it. It's worth it. But this is Divine Ruin. Gillian Flynn said it was fearlessly inspired. It's a steamy, restless end of the school year in New Orleans. Sister Holiday is finishing her music classes and preparing for her permanent vow ceremony, a pivotal moment in her journey of faith. But when one of her favorite students is found dead of a fentanyl overdose, Sister Holiday and her partner in PI, Magnolia Revo, are determined to track down the drug dealers. As students continue to fall prey to this sinister drug, Sister Holiday becomes more desperate to stop the epidemic while facing her own past with addiction, a demon that is never too far. With Duahi's signature mix of grit, heart, and faith, Divine Ruin tests the limits of Sister Holiday's devotion in her darkest and most shocking case yet. All that to say, I'm still not in the UK. I'm just hammering it home. I'm like, and we're in New Orleans. Ha ha ha. We can have good crime fiction too.
that's amazing.
I love these books. And I think going kind of like dark, gritty with Nun as your main character really speaks to me in terms of cognitive dissonance. But it also, I think, like with this, especially looking at the drug crisis in America and the dangers that they play at every kind of step of life and the reality of addiction and recovery and that journey as well. Again, I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier that when we have these moments to talk about important things, to have important conversations,
Yeah.
I love that they happen, that we can still have a great mystery time. You can
Yep.
still hit your expected beats. You can still get what you want to get from it. But if you are open to receiving some empathy, some knowledge, some whatever, it's also there for you.
I love that. And I think the crime fiction thriller genre is so uniquely positioned to have those conversations while also
Yes.
delivering incredible page-turning reads.
Abby, I could talk to you all day, but I know I have to let you go because secrets out, we're recording like in the middle of our workday here. Uh, do you want to like quick run through any of the books left you didn't get to mention? Just give us a rapid fire list.
Yes, absolutely. And just to say, I could also talk to you for the literal rest of the afternoon, but my lunch break
Happily.
is officially about to be up. So I have to dash, but I will just do a really quick plug for the new book by Soren Sveistrup. We talked earlier about my love of all things Nordic noir. So you may have seen The Chestnut Man on Netflix, which was an amazing adaptation of Soren's debut thriller of the same title, The Chestnut Man. Well, I've been waiting years for him to have another new book out in the US. And this book comes out on my birthday this summer. So Hide and Seek will be out July 7th. I do feel a little bit like it's a personal birthday gift to me, which I know it's not, but a girl can dream. So
It is
Soren's
if you speak it into existence, it's yours.
exactly. So Soren's kind of thing is that he writes these gripping police procedurals that sort of play on childhood rhymes or songs or things we would
Mm,
associate with childhood. So obviously, okay, here, hide and seek. We all know what that is. But this looks like it's going to be another incredibly creepy and page-turning thriller set in Denmark. I'm so excited. I will read anything this man writes, and I will also always be on the lookout for new Nordic noir. So I'm incredibly excited that he's returning this summer. And I believe that Hide and Seek is also already in the works as another Netflix show. So keep your eyes peeled for more news on that one.
which love it. I'm down to dive into the Nordic noir with you as well. I need to explore that. But Abby, thank you so much for joining me today and
Thank
for
you
your
so
incredible recs.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. This was truly such a pleasure, and I really appreciate you reaching out and just wanting to bring me on.
Oh, well, come back anytime first and foremost. But thank you for replying to an unhinged email. Listeners, you can find all of Abby's info linked in the show notes. Thank you all for joining us today. Consider following and subscribing for more conversations you won't want to miss next week, where we'll be celebrating Pride Month. Happy reading! You can sample and borrow the books from today's episode in the Libby app, or if you're a librarian, find them for purchase in Overdrive Marketplace. Book Lounge by Libby is a proud Evergreen Podcast signature program. Explore more amazing shows at evergreenpodcasts.com. This podcast is produced and recorded by me, Joe Skelly, with editing by Andrew Alonso. Our theme music is High Five by Rex Banner, used with permission. Book Lounge by Libby is presented by the Libby app. Learn more at libbylife.com/booklounge.